A weapon of war, UNRWA. Chief condemns Israel's blockade of Gaza as humanitarian catastrophe deepens. Starvation is spreading. People are exhausted. People are hungry. This is the weaponization of humanitarian aid.
Philippe Lazzarini, UNRWA Commissioner General, a crisis beyond words. In war zones, journalists often rely on what they can witness: the smoke rising from bombed buildings, the cries of children, the silence of hunger. But in Gaza, such direct
reporting has become nearly impossible. International journalists are barred from entering, leaving a veil over the suffering, broken only by the courageous voices of Palestinian journalists on the ground.
Over 200 have been killed since October 2023, many while doing their jobs under fire. Without access, the world must rely on the harrowing reports from humanitarian organizations that are still managing to operate in the besieged territory. Barely. The stranglehold on Gaza. Since early March 2025,
Israel has enforced a near-total blockade on the Gaza Strip, blocking shipments of food, medical supplies, and other humanitarian aid. Aid trucks pile up on the Egyptian side of the Rafah border, mere miles from the people who desperately need them. But the gates remain closed. This comes after the breakdown of a 2-month ceasefire on March 18th, when Israel launched a new wave of airstrikes. That ceasefire had included a roadmap, the release of Israeli hostages in exchange for a full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. But for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his coalition, particularly his far-right allies, that deal was a red line.
Instead, they demanded continued military pressure and territorial control. What followed has been described by aid agencies and UN officials as one of the worst humanitarian collapses in modern history. Weaponizing hunger. Philippe Lazzarini, Commissioner General
of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, gave a chilling assessment during an interview in London. People have now been more than 2 months without any aid, Lazzarini said. If food doesn't come in soon, people won't just die from bombs. They will die from starvation. He declared unequivocally, "This is the use of starvation as a weapon of war. That is a war crime." Lazzarini's words echo the findings of the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, IPC, a respected consortium including the UN, NGOs, and governments. Their latest report found the entire population of Gaza, over 2 million people, is experiencing acute food insecurity, with 22%, approximately 470,000 people, in Phase 5, catastrophe, the highest level of food emergency. This includes over 71,000 children and 17,000 mothers in immediate need of treatment for acute malnutrition. Despite Israeli claims that Hamas is seizing aid for its own use, the UN and major humanitarian organizations have dismissed those accusations. Aid groups argue that these claims are being used to justify policies that deliberately starve civilians. Indeed, Israel and the U.S. proposed a new mechanism involving private contractors guarded by Israeli troops to distribute aid, but most humanitarian agencies refuse to participate, citing both safety concerns and ethical objections. The political calculus behind the siege. Israel's leaders are increasingly open about the blockade being a calculated strategy. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir have both framed the denial of humanitarian aid as a pressure tactic to secure the release of hostages and defeat Hamas. Ben-Gvir stated bluntly that resuming aid before Hamas's total surrender would be a historic mistake. These comments have enraged many in Israel, including the Hostages and Missing Families Forum, which accused the government of prioritizing territorial control over the lives of Israeli captives. Israel is choosing to seize land instead of saving its people, said the group. The discontent extends into the military. A recent protest letter signed by 1,100 Israeli Air Force reservists accused the Netanyahu government of dragging out the war to serve personal and political interests, not national security. Netanyahu dismissed the protest as the work of a few bad apples, genocide, or strategic miscalculation. The legal and moral implications of Israel's actions in Gaza have ignited fierce global debate. South Africa and several other states have taken Israel to the International Court of Justice, ICJ, accusing it of genocide, a charge Israel vehemently denies. Lazzarini, while not a legal authority, warned that the destruction unfolding in Gaza may well fit that definition. By any account, the destruction is massive. Entire communities have been erased, schools and health centers obliterated, civilians, including women and children, displaced again and again. It could amount to genocide. According to international law, genocide involves acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. The International Criminal Court, ICC, a separate body, has already issued arrest warrants for Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant for alleged war crimes. 3 Hamas leaders were also named in the warrants, but all have since been killed by Israeli forces. Even longtime allies of Israel are expressing discomfort. President Donald Trump, despite generally supporting Netanyahu, said recently that the people of Gaza must be fed. A region in ruins, the physical toll of the war is staggering. Gaza, already among the most densely populated regions on Earth before the conflict, now lies in ruins. The Israeli military has razed entire neighborhoods and cities, especially Rafah in the south, where most of Gaza's displaced population has been forced to shelter, often in makeshift tents or abandoned buildings. According to UN estimates, 70% of Gaza is now uninhabitable, and Israel's apparent goal is to squeeze the remaining population into an even smaller area near the Egyptian border. Lazzarini described Gaza's residents as human pinballs, constantly fleeing from one danger zone to another, only to find death and hunger wherever they go. Meanwhile, discussions about Gaza's future have taken an ominous turn. Behind closed doors, sources in Washington and Tel Aviv have reportedly floated proposals to rebuild Gaza as a Mediterranean Dubai, devoid of its native Palestinian population, governed by foreign actors, and aligned with Israeli strategic interests. For Israel's far right, this is no longer just about Hamas, it's about reshaping the demographics of the region, potentially through forced displacement or permanent occupation. In other words, a future where Palestinians are erased. Never again, Lazzarini closed his interview with a stark warning for the international community. We said never again, but we are letting it happen again, on our watch. The inaction, the indifference, the political cowardice, it is monstrous. He traced the roots of the current crisis back to October 7, 2023, when Hamas-led fighters killed over 1,200 Israelis and took 251 hostages. That day, he said, marked the start of an Israeli response so overwhelming, so indiscriminate, that it now threatens to annihilate an entire civilian population. The path ahead, no one knows how or when this war will end. But one thing is clear. The legacy of the Gaza blockade will be long and painful. Whether seen as a tactical misstep, a war crime, or a genocide, the starvation of an entire population in full view of the world will remain a stain on the conscience of our time. What happens next? Continued war, political collapse in Israel, or a belated intervention by world powers may determine not only the fate of Palestinians in Gaza, but the future of global norms on humanitarian conduct in war. Whatever that future is, one thing seems certain. Peace is not around the corner. Thank you for watching InfoHub, your source for trusted news and insights. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay informed.